Welcome to the Ag Inspo podcast, where we delve into the dynamic world of agriculture, uncovering the stories that inspire, empower, and drive change. Join hosts Rena Striegel and Rabou as they explore the journeys of farmers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are making a difference as they navigate the critical work of transitioning their operation to the next generation. From navigating family dynamics to developing the next generation of ag leaders, we'll bring you the insights and inspiration you need to thrive in today's ever-evolving agricultural landscape. So whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just starting out, get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we learn from best practices and a few colossal failures on the Ag Inspo podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Ag Inspo and another great episode headed your way today. We hope everyone's doing well. The signs of spring are here, and that means that crop planting and tractors in the field and warmer, sunnier days are ahead of all of us. And so I'm here today with my awesome co-host, Rena Striegel. And
Hi,
Rena,
everybody.
how's it going today?
Really good, really good. Yeah, I agree. I think spring is in the air, and I notice in business, we have seasonality for everything. And about this time of year, it gets a little harder to meet those clients because the clients are out in machine sheds getting tractors ready to roll and are starting to pay really close attention to the temperature and the ground temps. And so we're starting to lose our farmers to the things that they love to do, which is farm. And so it's really great to be able to spend some time with you today and our amazing guests. Hi, Phil. How are you today?
Rena, I'm fantastic. It's a pleasure to be a part of this with you and Ron.
Awesome. Awesome. So Ron, why don't you introduce our guest just a little bit today?
Well, I'm pretty excited. We have a very dear friend of mine. His name is Phil Hinrichs, and Phil, I'm going to tattle on you a little bit here as I kind of break through the introduction of you and whatnot. So Phil is like I would say he's like a Renaissance man, right? Like he's done lots and lots of different things in his life. He's got a lot of great wisdom, a lot of great insight that I know he's going to share with everyone today. I was joking before we went on the air here that we're going to probably hear a few Philisms today. And those are always super fun for me. But I don't really know how many years ago it was. A neighbor of mine, a good friend of mine, he's actually one of my cattle partners. He called me up and he said, "Hey, you ever heard of a chickpea?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so he said, "What about garbanzos?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, those are the brown beans at the salad bar that no one eats." He said, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to grow any of those?" He said, "I got some guy that called me up and he wants me to grow some." But he said, "I don't know if I'm really up for it. Would you be willing to try it?" And I thought, well, I'm always willing to try whatever. So I reach out to this guy, Phil, and he says, "Oh, yeah, we need to get some chickpeas growing in Wyoming here." And I said, "Well, I don't know what they are. I don't know what the process is, but if you're willing to help me out, we'll see if we can make this thing work." And so we kind of got started by getting seed here and whatnot, and they kind of coached me about how we needed to plant them and whatnot. And Phil calls me up one day and he says, "Hey, I'm coming to Wyoming and I'm going to come to your farm." And I thought, well, he's coming from Washington. Why in the world does he want to come see my few acres that I'm growing out here in Wyoming? And I said, okay, well, show up when you show up. So he gives me a call a few days later, and he's a couple of hours out. And lo and behold, here comes this bright red Dodge Charger flying up my driveway and pulled, I think, about a 180 into my parking lot here at the farm. And he pulls in and out walks this guy with nice shoes on and nice dress pants with a Hinrichs Trading Company jacket on, and introduces himself to me. And from that moment on, I thought, I have no idea who this clown is. And but here we go, and I don't even know what a chickpea is basically, and I just put a bunch of these crazy things in the ground. And from that moment on, I have just come to really, really love Phil as a human being and respect him as a business person and admire all the things that he's done in life. And Phil, I'm so excited that you've been willing to join Rena and I today on the podcast. And thanks for joining us. And if you would maybe just kind of introduce yourself, tell us who this guy is, this mysterious chickpea guy. And I'd kind of like you to maybe start from the beginning about what your background is, some of the different things that your dad he had a completely fascinating career, and how you got to where you are today. And certainly, I hope that we'll be able to talk a little bit of baseball in between the lines as well.
Very good. Well, I think I'm very normal, which I guess I'm the only one doing the evaluation there. But I was raised in a family of farmers. Fast forward, I was one, two, three. I was the fourth generation coming to follow the Hinrichs family. And so, hey, I was brought into this world, in the 60s, and I got a chance to experience a family that was very aggressive in the farming business. And my father and his brother worked together with their father, all on the same farm. Diversified, oh boy, they sure were. I mean, back in the days, I guess it was very normal to have livestock, have farming, but they added the processing side of it to it that my great grandfather actually brought, which he started with. His name was Max Hinrichs, and he started with just processing and selling grass seed. Then his son came along, which was Max Jr., and Grandpa Max to me, and he started processing, farming, had livestock, and he was handling grass seed, and he was also handling wheat seed. It had just became a new deal. Very exciting times for the Palouse and the United States. So things were moving along pretty good, and the Hinrichs family always had the ability to hand things over to their youth at a young age. And so my father and his brother were aggressively interested, and they got handed over the tools, in their mid-20s, and they stepped it up. And once again, they were still doing cattle. They were doing farming, expanding in that group. They expanded into the processing side, but the new commodity that came along in the late 70s was pulses, which were peas, lentils. Chickpeas weren't quite introduced yet. And they also got into aviation. They came out of the Air Force and Army, and my uncle was a big pilot. And we brought on fixed wing airplanes for spraying and advanced into helicopters. And so the next thing you know, we've got cattle, farming, helicopters, airplanes, seed processing plants. And my dad couldn't stop there in the 70s and decided to be a developer and build a car dealership and a grocery stores and a couple other things. And I mean, as kids, we came on the farm, we were busy. We were always given a task that had a lot of responsibility. And when you're young, at 12, 13, you're learning. And as you get to 15 on up, you're kind of in charge of some certain things. And I can tell you one time I was on the fueling team of the helicopters, and the helicopter came in. It was, full of energy, and the chemicals were being loaded. I had the gas, and I went up there and started putting aviation gas in the chopper, and sure as heck, he throttles up and he's going to take off, and I'm getting a little nervous, so I pull out of the fuel, start running back to the truck, and it was something right out of, the I guess you would say MASH, it felt like. And the helicopter took off to spray its load. Before you knew it, this helicopter was right on top of us again, and he was back in about 3 minutes or less. And something was strange. Helicopter stops, pilot jumps out, and he's chasing me. I had forgot to put the gas cap on the fuel. This can definitely cause a problem. Thank God that a helicopter depresses instead of lifts. And I got away with it, but I was off that crew forever. So those are my short-term exercises. And I was glad to be off that crew, something we never told my mother about. Well, as we got older, life was getting us through high school. I proceeded to go to college, just like my grandpa did, my dad, my uncle, my cousins, and we all went to Washington State University. So that's where we got introduced to college. And I wasn't a big fan of college. I enjoyed the reason I went, but I went as an athlete, not as a student. And I told my father, I said, this school thing I think is a little too much. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you the difference of college and high school. He says, high school, you got to learn a lot of new things. But college, I think all they want is your money, son. So they'll keep you as long as you want to go. And once he said that, he told me it was easier in high school. I was excited to go, and it was a great time in my life. And I got to go with my brother, that was a year older, which was brother Max. And he seemed to drag me everywhere. And so we graduated, got done with college, and we kind of went our separate ways for a little bit. But that was kind of the early kickoff of an introduction of a Hinrichs family.
Well, now, I don't think you've gone in very deep. So Phil, you live in the Pullman, Washington. So Eastern Washington, in the Palouse region, which is just an incredible crop producing region in the country. It's just, you can pull these combines up on YouTube and watch these combines cut on these side hills that you can't imagine that a piece of farm machinery could even navigate these hills. They're just unbelievable. But the diversity of crops and the quality of crops with all this soil that's been built up from, I guess, all the volcanic ash or whatever from centuries back, has really made it a highly productive area. But one of the big things that you did in college was play baseball. And so I do believe, if my memory is correct, that you were the pitcher and got drafted in to play for the San Francisco Giants.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about the baseball career there.
Well, obviously something that I was very passionate about. And baseball is a beautiful thing if you like to watch paint dry. I mean, I'm sure I put my parents and my siblings through a lot of poor baseball, but I happened to be so passionate about it that it really got into my skin. And yes, I was fortunate enough to play collegiate baseball, and it also took me through the ability to graduate. And Washington State University was a college that we lived in the hometown. Pullman, Washington is the home of the Washington State Cougars and will always be. And I can just tell you, as a local boy, being able to play and put on the Washington State University uniform was a real big deal because, early in my stage, I was their bat boy. So I kind of worked my way right through the whole farming operation of a baseball life going through college, and we were very successful. We were always in the national rankings and going to the national playoffs. And so exposure was over the top. And it was just a really, probably a magical time for me. I never really thought too much. I always wanted to be a professional baseball player, but I struggled with ag business and baseball as both being passionable. And sure enough, a guy pulls up to our farm, just something right out of the movies, and says, "Hey, I'm from the San Francisco Giants, and I'm here to sign you a major league contract and to play for our organization." And my dad looked at him and said, "Are you from New York?" And he goes, "No, we're from San Francisco." And I looked at my father going, "I got this," and so sure enough, my next 5 years was living a complete new dream, and chasing my dream and my passion. And through those 5 years, I became introduced to my wife, and I met her along the way. And her name is Pamela, and she was from California when I met her. And I was able to convince her to come back to the great Palouse. She wasn't too sure about it. I know she gave it a couple thoughts, but we tried to play the game of being a Major League Baseball star, and I think that was what helped me corral her. My family loved to follow, and we had lots of laughs. You're definitely kind of involved during the whole farming season, so you're an outcast. You leave in February and you come back in October. And so, all the things I loved and saw them do, I was kind of envious. And when I'd come back, they'd always say, "Wow, you didn't miss a darn thing. The dirt's always going to be here." And I guess, they were right, but I always missed my family too. So yeah, it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good times.
Phil has this, Rena. The last time I was at Phil's house, he's building a baseball diamond next to his house, and like a pristine baseball diamond. And he's got this this fun little, I would call it kind of like a little man cave that he can cook inside there, and he's got a lot of his Giants baseball memorabilia in there, and a lot of stuff obviously from Washington State in there as well. So a super fun place to be. So you got out of the major leagues, came back to the farm, but that's not the end of the story.
Well, I mean, I guess when it comes to as a player, I had to make some choices, and I got traded to Milwaukee Brewers one year, and then I got sold to Mexico. So, things were moving a little fast. I felt like I was a piece of equipment in an auction, finding different farms I was going to. But, I was a pitcher, and, pitchers get to play. I was a professional short reliever. So I always pitched the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. It was when I was invited into the game, which was on the line. And if you want to grow up and really understand what's going on around you, be there at the close of opportunities of good or bad. And I found that very interesting. And actually, I think a lot of people can relate to this, but attention span is important. And I was a starting pitcher in college, and they would try to figure me out the 5th and 6th innings. Like, "Hey, where did you go? I mean, we're in trouble again in this game." And then I'd settle back down and finish out a game, but my attention span would kind of move around. Well, when I was a professional, they narrowed that right down. They said, hey, listen, you're throwing no-nos 1, 2, and 3 innings, and no one's really touching you. And after that, you're getting lit up like the 4th of July. So we're going to make you a short reliever. Once they did that, that was the extension to my baseball career. So I really owe it to the gentleman that found me, and life goes quick. But coming back to the farm, I think that's where we were going on this thing, was when I came on back, my father had just decided that he was going to move and start farming in Saudi Arabia. Here we go again. We're not thinking outside of the box. We're so far out of it, there is no box. And I'm going, Saudi Arabia? He goes, yeah, son. He says, it's crazy. They haven't even started farming yet. And we're going to go over there and start building farms. So my uncle and my father and their closest friend, Jack Jenkins, all 3 of them left over there and managed a extremely large build out of farming operations and irrigation. So they kind of left us boys behind to take over the family business at that point.
And so talk a little bit about that. I know you and I have discussed it in the past, but that experience that your dad had in Saudi Arabia, like, walk us through that a little bit. You've got some really interesting stories about, when I think of Saudi Arabia, I think of sand dunes and oil wells. I'm sure it's not like that, but I think that your dad had a pretty significant impact on international agriculture.
They certainly did, and I think their relationship. They met a family called the Al-Kharifs, and they both had the same goals and personalities. I think that the Al-Kharifs had to adapt to the Hinrichs personality, but the one thing about it, the men, my uncle Don and my father and Jack, they were developers and they were hands-on type growers. So they did go over there, and you're 100% right on, hey, there was sand. And the oil wells, well, they were a little closer to the Persian Gulf, but in Saudi Arabia, the land that they were handed to develop had never had any rain ever measured that had landed. This was just flat sand, hydroponic at its best. And these ranches were about 15,000 acres each, that came out to around 50,000 acres total. And they had some really interesting situations. It was flat. They drilled a well 300 feet down. There they got a well on each pivot. Off they're going, watering, hard, planting wheat, bringing wheat over from the state of Washington. So we were supporting their industry over there. And they were growing. And this farm all of a sudden decided the first year that they needed farm equipment. They need to go get something substantial. So they went to Paris to the Ag Show, and they were scheduled to meet 3 companies. One was Case IH, of course, John Deere number 2, and Alice Chalmer number 3. So they went over there, and I think they'll deny it, and probably should, but Case IH no-showed them. And they no-showed them, yes. And it was a little tough on Dad and my uncle because they weren't prepared for a no-show. And they probably talked them up quite a bit. And Case IH had a big presence in the United States, of course. So they kind of reset their toolbox that day, and They were waiting for their next one, which was John Deere. John Deere came in. They had 6 executives, I guess, with them. Everybody was prepared. They sat them down. John Deere introduced himself, had a great presentation. Approximately about 3 hours later, the meeting was done, that they could get done. And the Alcarives ordered 800 tractors, 800 combines, and all the parts that could go along with it.
Oh
And
my
that
goodness.
meeting was over. I think John Deere definitely had played their cards right, because in the 90s, there was a late 80s, there was not a lot of business in the United States. And the 9600 combine that was being produced during that time was all being produced for Saudi Arabia. All the factories were running hard for the Alcarives. And so at the end of the day, every farm got a John Deere dealership. It looked just like one that you drive up to, all parts, everything in order. It was just like you would expect. And Dad couldn't have been happier. And my uncle was over the top, and it was just a big day for all 3 of those boys.
Wow.
And
Please tell me that your dad got some big commission check for that. That'd be awesome.
Well, we definitely had all the John Deere toys during Christmas. I'll guarantee you that.
Well, and
That has to be one of the biggest single deal sales,
yes,
maybe ever.
I think it had to be the biggest in the world at its time. And then they took him to Russia, and Alcarives opened up Russia, John Deere, and then it blew its tops off at that point.
Wow.
So, yeah, Alcarives also owned Valley Irrigation out of Nebraska in the kingdom, in Pinta Volvo. Everything it took to run a farm, they owned it for the kingdom. So yes, it was an amazing time. Get to play with big toys and fresh ones. And can you imagine starting a farm with no used equipment? That's the used equipment you start with. Yeah, quite a world.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, a whole lot different world than most of us who farm are accustomed to, which is constantly repairing things. So when your dad was over there, here you guys are trying to run the farm, and yeah, so you kind of got kicked to the curb and said, figure it out.
Well, they had a lot of confidence in us, and I asked my uncle, hey, what are we going to do? And you know what he told me? He says, you got some great neighbors. He says, best advice I can give you is when they start cultivating, you start cultivating. And I thought, not too bad of an idea. And we just kind of followed the lead, and we were also in the seed business, so we were always interacting with these gentlemen. So we had a cousin that was the main farmer, so he kind of took the lead of running the farm. My brother took the lead of running the processing, and I took the lead of coming and going as I pleased, because I was kind of still a baseball player during that time. So I had an interesting, time of coming back, but I really wasn't a good farmer. I was one that enjoyed operating the equipment, but the agronomics of it, I was a better processor. And so that's the hat I left with. And I came back and put on the processing hat and worked along with my brother.
And what was the process discovering the chickpea?
The chickpea, before my father traveled to Saudi, they brought it to the United States from Mexico in the early 70s. And Dad had gone down there to visit a very good family friend of ours. And when he went down to meet Pancho, Pancho was the owner of La Macarena, which was still to this day a household name brand and company. And they were amazing chickpea processors. That's what they commanded, and that's what they controlled in the Mexico, and they were servicing Spain. Well, they gave us a truckload to bring home of seed. We brought it home, planted it, started out having a little success, and then we started having disease problems. And that puzzled my father. But when you live in Washington State University in the town of about 15,000 people, you know everybody, and the breeders of the peas and lentil industry and the wheat, he got them on board with the chickpeas, and they started changing the breeds and working on it. And that was Dr. Fred Muehlbauer, world-renowned chickpea breeder. He started playing with them, and he took it from a 1 to a 10 and in dominance. And we happened to have what was left over as the perfect storm of the chickpea varieties that were disease resistant, that were high yielders, and the right color for the market. And the Hinrichses started introducing them to growers. At that time, it was slow, but it looked like it was a great rotational crop.
And so as that grew over time, obviously, you guys started processing those. You kind of walk us through, the beginnings of, I think those of us who are farmers, we understand the farming aspect. We understand raising crops. We understand, the importance of disease packages, proper fertilizer, all of those things that go along with producing something. But then there's this whole other side to the products that we grow. There's a whole other side to that, to get them processed, to do it in a way which is marketable to the American consumer, and is not just marketable, but also palatable. Really you're introducing this new crop essentially into the American diet. And so what does that look like? I mean, when you take a product that you really don't have a lot of information about, and you don't have a lot of experience with, nor does the consumer, how does that go? How do you even start something like that up and get it to the American consumer?
Well, there was a short little window that there was a lot of change in the Hinrichs family's life. And so from the time my father went to Saudi, there was a 5-year window that we made a lot of changes, because us boys were the ones left behind and have this opportunity. So we had to help make some decisions. So what happened was, Ron, was my cousin Mark handled the farming side of it, and we scaled it down to where it was a sizable, manageable farm. Okay, and then the processing side, Max and I were sitting there looking at, hey, we have families, and how this 1980s, late 80s, economic downturn was working, and it was really working as a negative. Interest was 21%. Things were really skylighting, and we were a family of, change. We were adapted change quickly. So my brother chose to go to San Francisco and work in a commodity trading company and learn more about that side. And I know it was green grass to him, but he also brought that, from the farm to the fork, as you would say, knowledge into a trading house where you really understand the full cycle, which was amazing. So his learning curve went very quick and very sharp, and he started taking on the Mediterranean export of peas, lentils, and chickpeas. Well, that left me behind, and I chose to get in the processing side, but I chose to kind of slow it down, and I went to work for the same firm, but I was working back in Pullman. So here we were learning how to, trade and do, agribusiness by paper and moving. Well, I felt that the chickpea would be my quickest way back to the processing side. And if I could produce them, my brother could sell them. And I'm telling you what, it couldn't have gone any better. As quick as I could get growers to plant them and process them. And I was doing some custom processing that was not on our property because I did not have a facility then. And it started snowballing in business. One customer became two. And I realized at that point, I had to make a choice and I had to get into brick and mortar. And so I started finding my way through the industry of building a processing plant, getting the beans ready, and my brother was selling them out of San Francisco to Europe. And it was an exporting crop. Well, it started, slow, introducing the growers very skeptical. Didn't quite know about these chickpeas, didn't quite believe in them. We kept having grower meetings. Attendance was very soft in the early 2000s, but each year they were watching the neighbors as they grew them, and we became really a snowball effect. The varieties were working. The adaptability to the market was very fast and aggressive. The growers were getting aggressive, and here we went. And at that point, I decided to start building facilities and growing the business. And I talked my brother to come back about 2010. And that's when we really lit the match underneath it. And the production was just king. And we were only dealing with one commodity. So our focus was aggressive. I treated my business with family pride, but additionally, I added the baseball fundamentals to it. So you had to complete a task. You had to finish the game. There wasn't any walking away. And that was my personality of winning and challenging myself during the challenge. And I'm sure there's other ways of expressing it, but I was no different than a young farmer jumping out of bed to get to his field to take on his farm. I was doing the same thing in the processing. I love the people I got to work with. We really started with 3 people, and we ended up with 110 employees. It was unbelievable, the team that we got the opportunity to put together from an introduction commodity, which is very unique as you look around the world, that you get to introduce a commodity, turn around, watch magic, watch people's lives change on the farm, seeing the progress of the value of the input, and to have your story come true through a growing relationship of a farmer, honestly, is more than you can ask. And at the end of the day, I'm very grateful that my family encouraged me at a young age and made it fun, that allowed me to continue to make it fun and bring on the 5th generation to support us.
Wow. I think that's so interesting about your story, Phil, because a lot of times you hear entrepreneurs or just visionary people, they have an idea, for a product, but they don't know how to get the product to the marketplace. And you and your brother went and found the market, and then you spun back around and convinced people to produce because you already had the market opened up. I think that is such an interesting approach, which is rather unique and had to have created confidence in those producers on coming on board, is that you already had the markets opened up for them.
Well, I have to truly give the thanks to my brother, because his personality and his the way he handles himself in selling, he really, follows it through. And, it's when you're buying a chickpea, you're also buying a brand, you're also buying a family, you're buying, clear to the farm. And he stayed the course. And he made sure I stayed the course, because he was very conservative. I wouldn't say over, because he's a risk taker also, but I was also the one that was probably the risk taker and had to be railed in a little bit. If it wasn't him, even a farmer sometimes would say, "Whoa, horse." Well, I don't know how to say whoa in a horse race. I say giddy up, so I had a lot of fun. And the magic of a commodity, can you really imagine that at one time I witnessed 3,000 acres being a big deal of planting chickpeas, to our nation planting over 800,000 acres in 1 year. This is growth that was off the charts. Today, they've averaged back out to about 450,000 acres. And I can tell you, I would be very proud to know that we were managing over a third of that in the industry. And we were supplying probably 70% of the domestic market. And we had our market share in the export. And it was only because the industry didn't see us coming, nor we really knew we were coming. And then all of a sudden, the development of hummus. And once it was adapted quickly, I'm telling you right now, you had to perform, and we happened to be ramped up when that opportunity came. And it was kind of, I'm going to just say it was dumb luck that how quick the industry adapted and called out what we had. And it was a great opportunity for our growers and the industry.
Well, the chickpeas have been, because of you, Phil, and this, chickpeas have been an important part of our farming success and the different things that we've been able to accomplish. But tell our listeners, what is a chickpea, and what does it do, and why is it valuable, and why has the marketplace adapted so well to consumers wanting them?
Well, a chickpea, first of all, is a plant that if you're just saying, what does it look like out in the field and how does it grow? Well, it's basically a bean that is running anywhere from 8 to 10 millimeters, and so it's big, okay? And it's a very small marble to somebody that just can put it together. It's a plant that is a bush, okay? Why is that so important? Well, to a grower, it's off the ground, standing up, okay, where they can get their equipment underneath it, okay, harvesting. The biggest, I would say, strength on a farm opportunity was it was adaptable to all of their equipment that they already had. It was a great story. You seed it with the same drills, you spray it with your sprayer, you harvest it with a combine with the same header that you do wheat. So with those things right there, expenses are not brought up too heavily. Yes, there was some challenges of planting, but not all bad. Very adaptable. It works on steep ground in the Palouse where we have 30% slope. It grows very nice. It has 110-day growing period, which wheat has 90. Okay, so it challenges you that it's a late growing crop, planted the same time in April, but yet harvested 30 days later than your wheat. Now, that sounds like a head scratcher to some farmers, but the ones that looked at it realistically said, wait a minute, I can harvest that crop after winter wheat. So I can put all my power and effort into my wheat crop, and then I can come back and I can harvest these garbs, and a 35 bushel garb crop, chickpea crop, is as relative as 110 or 120 bushel wheat crop. But we're only using a third of the equipment, excuse me, of would say, like, if you're harvesting. So your manpower is less, your efficiency is better, and it really was adaptable, and the farmers loved every part of it. And it's a nitrogen fixed crop that you do not add fertilizer to. It makes its own nitrogen, and so the following crop coming behind it is being is receiving that nitrogen. And it was just a big win. I mean, you start thinking about what these breeders brought for disease resistance and quality performance to the market. Living in the Palouse with a cool evening, dry days, no humidity, because chickpeas do not like humidity. And it was just a masterpiece of the Palouse, Montana, and Idaho, and Wyoming, where it is dry.
Wow. So do the chickpeas, are they under the soil or are they in the bush?
They're in the bush.
They're in the bush.
A typical bush, yes. The seed's underground. One seed produces one bush that produces 100 to 150 pods per plant.
Wow.
So you're getting 100 to 1 minimum on return, okay? Which is not any different. You know, probably wheat gets 300 to 1, okay? One thing about a chickpea versus a wheat plant seed is the wheat seed has high energy, and it's very small, and it's just full of energy, and bam, it comes right up. A chickpea is you can look at it as a very large person that is slow moving, low energy, and it's big. So when it goes in the ground, it acts just like it. No energy, slow, needs warm ground. You can't put it in the wet, and it'll emerge in about 10 to 15 days. It's slow emerging, okay, where wheat will come out in 3 days. So there are some challenges. And the other thing about chickpeas that a grower has finally realized after their first 5 or 6 years of growing them, they don't look worth a darn for about 60 days. You do not want to show anybody that field. But once they canopy, they are flat amazing and rewarding.
They're truly amazing, and you're so right about the slowness of them coming up. I remember calling you the first couple of years. I thought these things have been in the ground for 2 weeks, and they barely just sprouted. And so they're very, very slow. But one of the things that's really great about them is they do have that really big canopy, which is really great. I remember I had a crop one year, Rena, that we were going to get a big snow. And I had a really beautiful crop of chickpeas, and they weren't some of the problem with them too is they don't ripen consistently. And so they'll ripen out. And then if you get a shot of moisture, they'll throw more pods and then they'll green back up again. And it's like they never stop growing. And the only thing that's going to prevent them from growing is not one freeze, but maybe 2 or 3 hard freezes. And then they'll finally decide that, yeah, we'll probably shut down. But unlike like a pea or a lentil, you can't cut them and then have them dry out. If you cut them green, they'll stay green. And so it's a real challenge to get them harvested. And we had a snowstorm that came in, and I kept calling Phil, and I said, I am concerned. These things are like half ripe, half green, and it looked like the pods were going to fall off of the plant because they were so crispy, but yet there were a lot of green ones in there. Well, you don't get paid for the green ones. So where's our balance? But we got this huge snow coming. And I said, what do we do? Do we just go in and cut them? And Phil said, you know, Ron, I think you just need to relax a little bit. And he said, let the snow come. I said, well, if the snow comes, I mean, it's in October, we're going to get a heavy snow and it's going to lay these things over. He said, they'll be fine. And I thought, okay, well, you might be the chickpea god here, but I know plants, when they get a 2-foot snow on them, they're going to lay over flat because even the trees do.
Oh, boy.
And I'll be darned if Phil wasn't right. We got so much snow. And I remember because we had deer hunters in. We got so much snow, you couldn't see the chickpeas in the field. I mean, it was 2 or 2.5 feet of snow. And it melted. And all of the chickpeas and all of the pods were standing straight up. All the pods were still attached to the plant. And after it froze another couple of times, we went in, best chickpea crop we ever raised. And so it's fascinating that you have to kind of go against, you know, it's counterintuitive, right? Like you have to go against some of the things that you think that you know when you're raising them. But it's really an incredible plant. But Phil, where's the power in the chickpea itself to the American consumer? Why chickpeas?
Well, a great question, and there's so many good stories here, but you know, the chickpea, you know, once it's clean and ready to go to the consumer, there's approximately 5 players in the domestic, you know, and international world. And number one is the canning business, okay, and not in this order by any means, but there's canning, okay, so you have companies like Seneca and Bush Bean and Campbell Soup and that all you can go to their shelf and get canned garbanzos, okay, and many others. You know, everybody's got a brand on a can, okay. So you got your canner that's old school, been around forever, okay. Then the next one is if you take it back is the seed. The seed has a lot of value, and there's a percentage of the production of this world is for farmers for seed. The next one is there is the packaging, dry packaging that the India, Pakistan relationship people, they handle packaging dry. They won't buy anything but a dry item, and then they will, you know, make their hummus or make their bread with it. After that, the next one is flour. And flour is a non-gluten, non-allergen product, which that is a chickpea. So you're filling a very high void of non-gluten for the breads and non-allergen for people that carry allergens and that for baking. And the chickpea flour is used for a blend, okay? There's a lot of that going on. Then the next one is the dipping, which is the hummus business, okay? And it's used, definitely, you see it all the time. There's 5 to 7 different hummus makers out there that live and die by the the hummus industry. And the last one is, I guess we would have to go to the pet food side. Okay, unbelievable, but there's most households have a pet, and a percentage of those household people are very particular about the quality of food that's given to a pet. So when you're dealing with high protein, which chickpea is, non-allergen, non-gluten, okay, all of a sudden their animal changes by having chickpeas in their diet. And this has become a huge industry. In fact, the pet food business several years in a row outdid flour, canning, and hummus. It dominated it, okay, which was just crazy good. Well, what comes when you dominate? You take somebody else out. Well, that's competition. Well, they raise their head up. So the industry, is very challenging in the pet food side. And as you can see, all I can tell you is I was challenged one time about a customer, and I couldn't say a word about this customer. All I could tell my sales team was, get out of my way, because I'm going to take over the production line with this new customer, and so you better get organized. And they looked at me like, well, who is it? I mean, this is the HTC team, we communicate here. And I said, I can't say. And sure as heck, Super Bowl weekend, I'm sitting there watching the Super Bowl like many other people. And on comes a commercial. And this commercial is Farmer Dog. And I just dropped my mouth because that was my customer. So I pick up the phone and I tell my son, hey, you watching the Super Bowl? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I said, you see that Farmer Dog? Yeah, that's the customer. And by the way, I think they can afford us, And he goes, you're kidding. He goes, that's the best news I've gotten all day, Dad. I go, yeah, that's funny stuff. I said, we'll report that after the Super Bowl, but we laughed and laughed, and they didn't trust me, but I didn't quite know who I had on the other end either. So it was really cool. Well,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when you're in the chickpea business, there's a lot of introductions, and there's a lot of people with their own stories. And it's all because about 2000, here came a chickpea, and it started a revolution. And that's one of the many good ones.
Well, I just have to ask, so your family opened up the Saudi Arabian market. Your family has opened up the chickpea market in the United States. What are you going to do next? What's the next frontier your family is going to tackle?
Well, we definitely have our eye on the prize, and the prize is our family. And I can tell you this, that Miss Pamela, that I am dearly married to for 42 years, deserves some time. And she has watched me play ball and have our fun, and it's now the kids' turn. And I'm very fortunate that all three of my children are very active people, and I have a daughter, Katie, that happens to be a college volleyball coach. Very interesting person to be around, because when you run into her, she's real cute. Hustle over there and get that, Dad. Could you get over there and grab that? Treat me just like an athlete. And boy, hey, that was my only daughter. I find humor in it. Others find it kind of different, but I find humor in it. Then my oldest boy, Philip Jr., he's a college basketball referee. So he's calling me out on everything. I mean, and he's right. And I always on the gray area. So I got a referee that keeps me humored. And then I have a son, Kyle, my middle son of ours, and he's active in the business. And he's working for our mills today.
Wow. And I think you've got some next gens, right? I think you've got a few grandbabies that you are probably focused on as well.
Definitely. I have been blessed with 4 grand boys, and the oldest is 5, and the youngest is about 4. So these boys are extremely aggressive, of having fun, keeping me and my wife and the whole family's active. And we have a new baby girl coming in 30 days. And so we've got a lot of excitement coming down the trail, and we couldn't be prouder. And we all live about 30 miles away from each other, so we're all neighbors. So that's really cool. And so that's the family activity.
Well, and Phil, I want to emphasize that a little bit more, because that's one of the things that I've always just really loved about you, and that is the fact that you have always kept that family perspective, and that your team that you built at HTC was a family, and continues to be a family, even though that ownership has changed. And some of the greatest people, Rena, that I've ever been around in business work for Phil. And the team that he put together was really incredible. I mean, you surround yourself with great people, and great things can happen. And I was actually Phil was kind enough to have me come in and do a keynote speech for one of his grower meetings. And I remember that he pulled Kyle and I, his middle son, aside after the whole thing was finished and everyone had cleared out. And I don't think Phil will mind me sharing this, but Pam had a bout with cancer, and she has beat it. And no matter what was happening in his business at that moment, the most important thing was Pamela. And when Phil says that Pamela deserves that time, I mean, that's really from the heart, because I just knew from that moment on, and that was, earlier on in our relationship, that's what was important. Like, he had all of these creations and all of these animals that were functioning on the outside world, and that were incorporated into Pullman and into WSU and into the chickpea world and into production agriculture. But what really was the core of all of that was his relationship with his wife, and his relationship with his children, and the relationship, honestly, that he had with his employees. And that is, to me, that's what spells a great man. And Phil epitomizes that greatness, in the sense that that perspective is really what's important. I mean, we can go do all these great things in the world, but if we don't keep a proper perspective on those things, we can lose everything. But if we maintain that, then we still have everything. And so, Phil, you've always been a super, super tremendous example in that regard. And Phil has taken my my middle son, Spencer, really under his wings, and has given Spencer so much confidence and so many delightful memories. I could share stories for the next hour about Phil and the great times that we've had, and the things that we've done, and the places that we've gone, and the things that he's allowed Spencer to do and partake in, and whatnot. The list goes on and on. But but really, I mean, it's the heart of the man is really what has made this whole thing work. And you can tell that when you're around Phil, that when he takes someone like myself and someone like my son Spencer and takes us in as family. I mean, there's just nothing more important to him. And so, Phil, thank you for doing that, and thank you for everything that you have done in production agriculture, in for the chickpea industry and production agriculture and farmers in your region, and farmers like me, because that has made it's the difference that you've made, and the impact I think that we can all make just by putting our best effort forward.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to make it really clear. When I was building my team, a lot of people don't know this, though. I was a major leader in my class for back-to-back years, and it was third grade. That was where it was at. And I probably had third grade twice and didn't know it. But I really didn't feel like I was the smartest cookie in the cookie jar by any means. But what was most important to me growing up was having great people around me. And, I'm not sitting here to brag about my Uncle Don or my dad, but you know what? I would watch them do everything, and I thought they were magical. And they allowed us to experience early. So when I was building a company, I went out very quickly and found a mentor, and they happened to be in Nebraska. And it was a company called Kelly Bean. And I just loved their organization. I loved their team building. I wanted to copy everything they did, but unfortunately, your own personalities come out of it. And I started building my organization. And the biggest fear I can tell any young men out there that think they're challenged, number one was I made my financing my biggest fear. So I'd always hire the best people in finance. And I had CEOs and CFOs that I felt were amazing and that really had control of the throttle. I had the control of the growth, and they had control of the finance. And it really took the edge off so I could concentrate on the build. And as you build, you find builders within your company and energy. And I found that between my Rodney Rupp, a great employee of ours, and my son Kyle and my son Philip, and these people getting the energy together. And the luck of the Irish, of anything I could say, is my father was alive and he came back and walked the walk with me. And he would always be there, wanted nothing except, let's try this idea. And I was very adaptable. I did try to push him around a little bit on his ideas, but he always had a counter. And that's just because he was ready for change and a joy to work with. And then I had the luxury of the confidence of having my brother. And you put a good team together. My number 2 employee was Jackie Hodson, that sat beside me, and still to this day, she sits beside my son. And I mean, she's amazing. Repeat any phone number. She's amazing. So, for the listeners out there, it isn't an overnight dream, but it is, as we all hear, a journey, but it's a better journey with qualified people.
I think that's a great lesson, because that's probably, I think it's interesting to hear that your family has always sort of succeeded business early, right? Like you were talking about your father went off to Saudi Arabia and turned the business over to you, and his father had done that to him, and now you're doing that for your son. So, what are the things that are occupying your days now? Because I cannot imagine that you are sitting along the sidelines. So what's got Phil's attention besides your beautiful wife, but what are the business activities that you have going these days?
Well, I'll make one really short deal. I put together a company called BlackRock Cattle Company because I've always wanted to have cattle. Well, I got good news for you. I got 0 cattle, but I do have a cattle name. So I did conquer that. That's about as much cowboy as you can see in me, and I'm wearing a Wyoming hat today, Ron. Yes,
I
sir.
totally noticed the bucking horse there. I was going to make a comment to that before we went off here.
Of course.
Love
And
it.
then, but what I can really tell you that we're involved in right now is we are restoring. My grandpa built a home in 1936 on the farm, and we have completely restored it internally, and we're now doing the external part of it, and we're bringing back the farm for the family, and it's going to be quite a piece. I'm so proud of where we're at on it. I'm working daily with my brother Max on it. We're really not carpenters, but we can sure point and come up with great ideas. We've got great local people helping us, and we have a big smile every day sending pictures to my uncle that's still alive that lives in Brussels, and it was a house he grew up in. So
Wow.
we're reliving the dream.
Wow. I do have one question to ask. One of the videos that you sent us to prepare for this podcast today was you standing in front of your company with horses that have their necks that move. Can you tell me about the horses?
Yeah, thank you. Those are another part of my big cowboy wish.
Okay.
As you know, I have no cattle, and now the only horses I can feed are steel horses. And an artist from Bozeman, Montana, Jim Dolan, is the artist behind my 11 horses. And I was inspired by growing chickpeas in Bozeman, and I saw these, and I thought, wow, what a cool thing. And I thought, how can I justify these? And I called my accountant. He says, oh, those are fixtures. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, just like art, like lamps. He says, they're fixtures. It's legal. I said, well, whatever. I want them. So I brought them home. And I surprised a lot of people. But I didn't quite know where I was going to go with them. But when I did, I named every one of them is named after a chickpea. So we have Tammany, Dwelly, Sierra, 1914. They all have a name of a variety. And the champions varieties all are at my home now. And it's the craziest thing. They move by the wind on hinges. They actually, cars will pull over wondering what's going on. They're life size, and they're just a lot of fun and a great thing to visit people on. A lot of fun.
Well, I thought that they were just really interesting.
Oh, they're completely fascinating. And another thing that Phil had in front of his main processing facility was John Deere tractors, antique, old 2-cylinder John Deere tractors. And so he called me up. He said, hey, I want you to bring Spencer out here, my middle son, and I need him to fix some of these tractors. So we flew out. He had 4 tractors lined out in front of his shop. And we got out of the truck and he goes, Spence, I need you to fix these. Go. and that's it. And they hadn't run in many, many years. And Spencer was able to get 3 of them running. We actually ran those in the National Lentil Festival parade together. We had an absolute blast doing that. It was super, super fun to be able to do that. Tremendous crowd, by the way, there in Pullman. And then later that, I guess it was the next day, we were out on Lake Coeur d'Alene on Phil's boat, which incidentally is named Garbanzo 1, which is spelled W-O-N. So conclusion of a great career in the chickpea business.
Well, that's
Thank you.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, as we start to wrap up, we of course have to do our trivia questions, which Phil, you did such a good job of giving statistics of your industry. Unfortunately, I do believe that you have already answered all of my questions. So we may just have to do a little bit of a recap of the top stats of
Okay.
Garbanzo. Although there is one question that you did not answer, so we'll ask that one. So which state in the United States is the largest producer of chickpeas?
Montana.
It is Montana. I figured this was going to be way too easy for you, way too easy. And then who is the largest consumer of chickpeas? Which country?
India.
It is
India.
India.
Mhm.
It's India. Yeah, when I lived in India, I ate a lot of chickpeas. A lot of chickpeas. I actually love them. So I'm very thankful that you are raising them and promoting their growth. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that 32% of the total crop is grown in Washington. So on those nice steep hills. But yeah, you answered all of the trivia questions. So it's not, we've kind of had an anticlimactic end to our podcast, but the stories were amazing. And thank you so much for sharing them with us.
Well,
I'll tell you, if you want to,
one
Phil.
question that I would have is where is the largest organic grower in the United States of chickpeas?
Is it Ron Rabou?
Hey. I mean, he's got the most courage of any man I know. Fantastic.
There you go, Ron. Look at you.
So there you go. What do you think of that?
Oh, well, I think for all the complaining you do about Wyoming, I think you're just a stealthy giant amongst men. That's what I think. You're just putting up a bunch of smoke and mirrors for our benefit.
It's all in joking, right? If we can't make fun of a little bit about where we come from, then who are we really? So no, we've been very blessed.
I'm starting to think that perhaps this is your way that you keep the competitors out of your marketplace. If you just complain enough, no one will even think anything exciting is happening there. And then we find out that there is some very exciting things happening there that you're just not telling us. See?
Well, you know what's fascinating is it doesn't matter where you go. So first of all, every place has its challenges, right? But it's fascinating that no matter where you go, American agriculture is amazing. And the resiliency in the American agriculture industry is completely amazing. So, as you know, Rena, I have a heart for the Midwest. I love it there. There's just so many parts of it that I just love. But when I go up to Eastern Washington, I absolutely love it there. As much or more than I love the Midwest. It's tremendous. Yeah. And when I go down to Alabama or Mississippi, or I go to the East Coast, or it doesn't matter, you tour a farm in Florida, which I've done multiple times. It's just amazing when you can see what American agriculture contributes to this country, that so many of us, you and I, spent time this last summer with some very, very dear friends in Oregon on an onion farm. And to see everything that's going on in American agriculture is tremendous. And there's so many, and that includes states like Wyoming. I mean, Wyoming is a leader in a lot of respects in American agriculture. but we're just not necessarily, one wouldn't identify Wyoming as a really agriculturally prosperous state, but we are in our own ways. But every state is in their own way. And what I would encourage everyone to do, that if you ever get a chance, well, first of all, no matter where you travel, you should travel outside of a city, or you should travel outside of any destination that you're going, and you should go see American farms. You should go see what American producers are doing, the different things that the challenges that they are experiencing, and the different things that they have going on. But if you're ever in an area like where Phil lives, the Palouse region is unique all unto itself. And when you can sit in a combine, as Phil has allowed Spencer and I to do, that's moving at 1 mile per hour with a 45-foot head on the combine, and you're harvesting 150 bushel dryland wheat that's as high as my chest. It is unbelievable. Like, you can't imagine it. And you travel through the Palouse region and you see these steep hills that you wouldn't even dare take a four-wheeler on. And they're just completely covered in chickpeas. And you see these combines that are level with the world, but the heads are just about perpendicular to the combine, because that's how they travel. It's just tremendous. And so I think that the lesson there is that we can all become, complacent or disgruntled or whatever with where we live. And sometimes we have to have those, conversations or comments or whatever based on where we live, because we're familiar with it. But when we step away and we see the value that's out there in different parts of our country, it really is a tremendous thing to see. So I would encourage everyone, no matter where you are, go experience American agriculture, because it's really the heart of who this country is, what we represent, and where we came from.
Could not agree more.
Awesome.
Well, Phil, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I think I need to come and have that gin and tonic with you, because I have a million questions about all of these stories. So we may have to have a part 2 to this, because of course my little inquisitive brain has coming up with about as many questions as it can pack into its brain. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for just all you're doing for agriculture and what your family has done for generations. We appreciate that so much, and just couldn't thank you enough.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. It's been a fantastic ride, and the next generation's in great hands. So thank you.
Well,
all
Phil,
right,
you
everybody.
tell your family hello, and we will see you soon, and love you very much, brother.
You bet. Our love to every one of you, and God bless America.
Amen.
Well, this has been another amazing episode of Ag Inspo. Thank you so much for joining in. We will have Phil's contact information and information about his businesses in the show notes below. Please hit the subscribe button to follow along with more episodes as we bring you more amazing leaders and innovators in agriculture. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Ag Inspo podcast with Rabou and Rena Striegel. Find Ag Inspo on Transition Point Business Advisors or Farm Journal's YouTube channels, as well as anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. For more information about today's guest or the resources referenced today, please see the show notes listed below. Join us next time when we will meet another inspirational leader who has taken those small steps to bring about really big change.